DLSU economic program on the Duterte administration's economic agenda. Let me introduce to you our speaker for today, our second speaker for today, Dr. Sebastian.
Good morning, everyone. So, yes, how do we finance economic programs under Duterte's economic agenda? But before we proceed, let me lay down the foundation of Duterte's administration's economic, social, and political agenda. And he quoted this during his inauguration. And I'd just like to highlight 2 points here. One is providing for those who have little and helping the wage earner. So this is essentially the foundation of his agenda, or so he claimed. And recently, he came up with 10-point economic agenda. If we go through it one by one, you will see that there's nothing really different from the past administration's agenda, except only that if you look at the second bullet point, instituting progressive tax reform and more effective tax collection. Recently, this has taken shape with the proposed increase in VAT from 12% to 15% and the proposed changes in tax structure sponsored by Congresswoman Villar. And since so far, this is the only way that's taking shape, my presentation now will focus on the tax reform. That's why my lecture could have a subtitle, Taxation 101. But why is tax an issue? We have to consider that aside from tax reforms, there have been approved increases in the salaries of so many sectors, once among teachers, among government employees, among policemen, not to mention the proposed increase, again, for the pension of the SSS pensioners. So the question there is, with these proposed tax reforms and with these proposed increases in the income of these sectors, how would government finance these increases? Before we answer that, we need to understand how government finances public programs. Basically, government has 4 sources of revenues. One is taxes, the other one is non-tax revenues, meaning from the government corporations that generate their own income. However, with the 1987 privatization program, these GOCCs or government-owned companies have been placed under the private sector. That means the income of these companies are no longer plowed out to the government, but instead owned by the private sector. Third source is borrowings, both from domestic and foreign sources. But again, there's debt servicing required in this revenue option. And finally, withdrawals from available cash balances, which means if we have savings in the past budget, in the past year, then we can draw from it this year. Now, looks like our government has focused so much on tax revenues and not on the other revenue options. As for the types of tax, just a basic introduction to types of taxes, we need to understand how us citizens are being taxed. One is we are taxed based on our income, be it from our personal income or corporate income. Second, we are taxed on our consumption. Whatever goods we buy or services that we availed of, we are taxed through the VAT, or value-added tax. There's also excise tax, taxes on luxury goods, alcohol, tobacco, automobiles, non-essential goods, and taxes on international trade, on customs, etc. If we are going to compare our tax sources, using vertical analysis, the share of personal taxes, the Philippines has the highest at 22%. Meaning 22% of our government revenues come from personal taxes. And if we are going to do horizontal analysis, other countries like China, 64% of their taxes come from the value-added tax or consumption tax, as well as the Latin American countries. In the case of Malaysia, corporate tax account for 51% of the revenues, as well as Vietnam at 45%. And Thailand, 33% of its taxes come from excise or luxury taxes. Now, the ideal tax system should minimize leakages, should minimize undeclared revenues, overstated deductions, and corruption. Now, we have to lay this down so that in our proposed, if there will be any proposed tax system, we have to consider this. So here, I'd just like to give you a historical background how our personal income tax evolved. Especially because 22% of our government revenue come from our personal taxes. So back in the 80s, hope you can see, there's still an income level that was still exempt from tax. Not over 2,500, note that this was in the 80s. There are not, those people earning 2,500 annually are exempt from paying taxes. And the maximum in the bracket is 500,000 annually. That's the maximum tax bracket that would have to pay 35%, roughly 35% of their income. Again, in the 80s, the poverty threshold was 23,885 per family of 5. But given this poverty threshold at the time, the poor would have to pay, or those earning below 23,885 would still have to pay 875 pesos plus 11% of their income tax. Meaning the poor has to pay as well. They are still being taxed. Now, come 1998 tax restructuring, and this is our current tax rate, there are no more exemptions. Everyone earning below 10,000 would have to pay a minimum of 5% income tax. But still, the maximum was 500,000. Recently, PIDS or NEDA, I think it was PIDS, came up with an estimate of what's the required annual family income to have a simple and convenient lifestyle, meaning the middle class. And they estimated it at 120,000 per month or 1.44 million income per year, which means using this estimate of a middle class income and just supposing it against the tax rates, the middle income would be placed at the highest bracket. So beginning this middle income and up, you will be paying the maximum tax rate of 32%. Also, if we're going to use the average annual income per PSA, in 1994, the average family income is 235,000. That rate would require the family to still pay roughly 25% in income tax. And considering the annual poverty threshold of family of 5 in 2015, which is 109,000, that would require the family to pay something like 20%. Meaning, if you are living below the poverty line, you still have to pay 20%.